Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. As Jamie said, I'm Dave Scott, and along with me is Brian Wilson. A little bit about us. Both of us are from Colorado. We both worked in the CABT study group together. I'm a certified biomedical technician, CBT. Started in biomed in 1989, so I've been a biomed tech for a long time. Not quite as long as Brian has. Also, I'm responsible for starting the Colorado Association of Biomedical Equipment Technicians, easier to just say CABMET, study group in 2004. The study group was focused on helping people prep for CBET. And in that time, there was 16 years, we helped thousands of people get their CBET. And in 2019, that group was purchased by AAMI or AAMI, and now it's run as the AAMI CBT prep course. And I'll let Brian say a couple things about himself.
Nothing too exciting. Like I said, it started in 1987. It's a biomed, doing my internship. And Dave put together the first study group, and I was one of the first members of the study group. So kind of have a little legacy with that. And then about 7 years later, after I got my CBET through the study group, Dave approached me and asked if I would be interested in doing a CRES radiology one. And so we've been doing that since 2011, and it was purchased as well in 2019 by AAMI.
So together, both of us have been biomed techs for a long time, and I'm going to have problems with this advancing slides, I guess.
What if you were to stand on the other side?
There we go. So out of this group, who has heard of this new certification, CABT? Has anyone heard of CABT? If so, what do you think of CABT? I can look at the chat and see if there's anyone on there chatting about this, and so far I don't see anyone. I don't know, maybe I don't know how to look at the chat on here. Guess I'll leave that part off. So this is a new certification. It just came out from AAMI, and I think they've only run maybe one test cycle, and that was in September. And now, as you'll find out when we go through the slides, it is available anytime. It's not like the CBET where you have to schedule a date, and it's only in the CBET always takes place in May and in November, and sometimes at the AAMI conference. But now this new CABT, or they're calling it CABT, the CABT certification is going to be available almost any time. So I think that's a good thing. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties here. So CABT stands for Certified Associate in Biomedical Technology. I think if you looked at the program guide for this, for the mixer, it said Certified Associate Biomedical Technician, I think it said, and that was incorrect. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, that it's a Certified Associate in Biomedical Technology, CABT. And this Certified Associate in Biomedical Technology is an individual who is planning on entering the HTM field or looking to earn an entry-level certification. This professional will be responsible for scheduled technology maintenance, supporting senior technicians, incoming and routine inspections on new equipment, and minor problem solving and minor troubleshooting. Some background on the CABT. This is a certification. This certification is not renewable, so it has to be, if you have the certification, it's good for 5 years. And in that 5-year time, you can work on studying for the CBET, which is a renewable certification. But if an individual wishes to maintain the designation of CABT, they will need to take and pass the test again. So every 5 years, you'd be taking and repassing the test, hopefully, if you want to remain as a CABT. Otherwise, you would move on to CBET, Certified Biomedical Equipment Technician, or CRES, Certified Radiology Equipment Specialist. So at the 5-year point, the candidate will have the necessary experience, because to take the CBET test, you have to have a minimum of 4 years of experience if you have no degree in the biomedical field. 2 years of experience if you do have a degree. So one good thing about this CABT certification, I think, is for students that are coming right out of a biomedical program, you can get this CABT certification while you're still in school, because you'll see all you need to have is GED or high school diploma coming up in some other slides. But it's something that maybe you can look at while you're in school and take this CABT. And then when you're going into the workforce, you have this CABT as a certification to let people know that are possibly wanting to hire you that you have the knowledge to pass this certification test. And also for people that are new, maybe career changers, so on. We'll talk about that a little bit later in some of our other slides coming up. CABT background. CABT characteristics include strong communication skills, problem-solving abilities, resourcefulness, strong time management skills, technology acumen, highly motivated, and resilience. I know a lot of places that I talk to, they like to hire people just based on the communication skills and time management and like the person, and then they figure that they can work on training the other parts for people that maybe don't have the background. Where we live at in Colorado, there's no biomedical program in our state, and there's no biomedical programs for several states around us. So a lot of the people that we have that end up getting hired, they're cross-training, I would call it, or learning on the job, or I don't know, what would you call it, Brian?
Yeah, OJT, or, kind of build your own biomed.
Yeah. So this CABT will hopefully kind of help direct the people, those type of people as they go. Don't you think the same thing?
Yeah.
So to be eligible to take this CABT test, all you have to have is a high school diploma or a GED to sit for the exam. A copy of the applicant's high school diploma or GED documentation must be submitted with the application. So there is an application that you have to fill out. And the application is all available online. The application, the candidate must submit the completed application registration form and appropriate fees at least 15 days in advance of the exam. I think with this exam, I think this is taken out of like the CBET part, but usually it's a lot faster with the CABT, I think, is what they're planning on doing. Since it's so new, I think it's still, the handbook is still getting updated, but CABT exams can only be taken via online proctoring. So you don't even have to go to a testing center to take this test. You can take it at your own house. And we'll talk about some of the conditions that have to be met in the testing environment where you take this test from. So, but it can be taken pretty much anywhere. Completed application forms should be sent to the AAMI address there, emailed to AAMI, and or also fax number there. And I have a link on this presentation for the store. You go to the store to fill out the application and you submit it, and then you'll get your billing. You have to create an account at AAMI to be able to do the application. So once you create that account, come in and in the store and pay for it. And then at that point, did I jump too far? No. The online proctoring exams for CABT will have a set of rules and requirements, which we'll talk about more about later. Test takers must abide by the rules that address the test environment, the computer or devices used. You can use a tablet, I guess. Doesn't have to be a computer. The biggest thing is it has to have a webcam and a microphone or a webcam connected to it. The tester's behavior and consequences of rule violations. So you'll see I have a big page with a bunch of check marks and so on it that kind of tells you the different rules of the CABT testing environment, coming up in a few more slides. So for AAMI members, this test costs $200. For non-AAMI members, it costs $250 to take this test. And a lot of the stuff that we're covering today out of this presentation is taken directly from AAMI certification handbook or ACI certification handbook. So testing, online proctoring conditions and requirements. Candidates participating in the online proctored exam must have the following: have a functioning camera linked to their computer that can track them during the duration of the exam. So if you step away from your computer during the exam, you'll see it later coming up in a couple more slides. Your exam is over and you failed. So you just threw away $200 or $250 to AAMI because you didn't follow the rules. So there's some specific rules to taking this test. Participants must show a photo ID using the webcam prior to the start of the exam, just to verify who you are. Can the test be scheduled anytime? So that's the part I was talking about 15 days prior earlier. And I emailed AAMI and asked them about this. And the answer that I got was the exam times are typically 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. I'm guessing that's Eastern time. I don't know what time zone that is, or maybe it's every time zone, so it might be a little bigger window, but Monday through Friday. However, there are some weekend and evening options for online exams. So once you submit your application, that's when you'll get the next step, and it'll be scheduling your test. Once the application is submitted and fee is paid, the test applicant can expect confirmation instructions emailed in 2 to 3 business days after you've paid and submitted your application and it's been accepted. There are no testing windows. So unlike the CBET and the CRES, which I said were May and November, there's no testing window for this exam. It's all done online. So all approved test takers will log in to the testing company's website to select their date, time that they'd like to sit for their 2-hour exam. All CABT testers must have strong internet connection. So if you lose connection during the test, that's, I think, not good. Working webcam and working microphone. So they want to listen to the environment around you. So you can't just have someone standing like out of the camera's reach telling you the answers as you're taking this CABT test. So that's where the microphone part comes in, I guess. Both the webcam and microphone must remain on during the entire exam. So this is that page I was talking about earlier with all the check marks or X's on it. Below are a list of condition violation actions that will be strongly enforced during the online proctored exams. And this can be found in the handbook. It's called Appendix A, and it's all the way at the very end of the handbook on the AAMI website. So if you look at these conditions at the top, test taker left the area. Like I said earlier, your exam is terminated. You forfeit your money that you paid, and hopefully maybe you'll schedule the test again at some point. But if you leave the area during the test, it's over with. Camera out of position. The test taker will get one warning followed by a termination. Audio problem, same thing, one warning and then followed by termination. Camera out of focus, one warning followed by termination. I don't know how the camera gets out of focus. I thought that like most webcams kind of autofocus, so can't really see that as a problem. Talking, non-test related talking during the test, like if you talk to yourself, I guess, or whatever, no action will be taken. Poor lighting, so the area has to be well enough lit that they can see what you're doing with the webcam, be able to see the person taking the test. One warning followed by termination if the lighting is bad. Unauthorized test aid, of course, that would be termination. Like I'm thinking that would be maybe like you're using your cell phone or you have something there that you're like the internet that you go on another computer, or they can see you reaching around to somewhere else, like anything that looks like you're doing something other than just taking the exam would be considered an unauthorized test aid. Invalid keystroke, one warning followed by a termination. Video signal problem, like if you lost internet connection, that's why it said the internet connection is important. If the video signal is lost, then your test will also terminate. This is all for online testing. And this is a new way of taking tests for ACI. And it's hopefully will work out really well for people because you don't have to go anywhere to take it. You can take it from your own home or somewhere that's quiet and no one really walking by in the area. Multiple people in view, one warning followed by termination. So they say that they don't want anyone walking by as the person's taking the test or someone, like other people in the room. So just that person that's the test taker in the room. So pretty much a quiet room with no other people than the test taker in it. Inappropriate environment, that's kind of what I was talking about there with the other people and the lighting and all that stuff. One warning prior to start. So reading exam aloud, one warning followed by termination. I guess they do that in case they think that, maybe there's someone else that you're communicating with in the room as a tester because they can't see everything that's in that environment, just what's on that webcam. Talking about the exam is one warning followed by termination. And then glasses, reading glasses only, no action for that. I know I wear reading glasses from time to time, and I never know that when I'm going to need them until I need them. So mostly it's stuff up close, real small that I can't see. But yeah, if there's something on the test, I might need to have reading glasses for that. So they allow that, reading glasses. Pan the room, that means like looking around the whole room for maybe other people that are giving you answers. One warning followed by termination. Test item theft is termination. So I'm guessing that's maybe if you're capturing the screen or taking a video, or I don't know how they determine that test item theft part, but it's automatic termination of the exam. Leaning out of view, that kind of goes along with that being off the camera, no video signal or being off the camera. One warning followed by termination. Cell phone being used, of course, that is automatic termination. Using a camera on the cell phone to take a picture, same thing as like that. That kind of is the same as the
Item theft.
Item theft, yeah. Same thing pretty much is this test item theft is the camera taking pictures. And wearing headphones is not allowed. One warning prior to start. So there's some very specific rules for this online testing, and they seem pretty easy to follow. I mean, if you just sit there and take the exam and you're done. Like I said, it was 2 hours. It's a 2-hour exam. So 2-hour closed book. Of course, 100 multiple choice questions. And this is new. They have now have a passing score, and you will not find this in the handbook if you're looking through the handbook, because I looked everywhere for it and it said that it'll be determined after the first cycle of test takers. So this is new, 75 correct answers out of 100. So it's a higher percentage than the CBET. CBET and CRES, well, no, CRES is a little higher, huh, Brian? It's a little higher than 70%. So the CBET is right around 70%. So it's 165 questions on the CBET. And this one is only 100 questions. But CBET, you got to get 116, which is approximately 70%, because I think 70 would be 115.5 on the CBET. So they rounded it up instead of down. But this one, 75%. So you can only miss 25 questions, which it's a lot shorter test and it's a lot shorter time period. And I think it's more entry level based. So it's maybe more questions that should be able to answer them out of those 100 questions. Candidates will have access to a simple calculator during the exam. So add, subtract, multiply, divide, square root. That's the simple calculator. And that, honestly, for this test, that's probably all you're going to need, because there's just, you'll see later when we talk about electronics, there's a little bit on Ohm's law, and that's really about it. I mean, as far as anything that might need to be calculated, I think just very simple electronic formulas. So I can't even imagine really having to use a calculator. You probably could do it just by hand, whatever it is. Cell phones, iPads, and other electronic devices that have internet capabilities or cameras are not allowed. Which brings us to the test content. Test content covers anatomy and physiology, medical devices as related to patient care, safety and healthcare, fundamentals of electricity and electronics, reasoning and problem solving, healthcare information technology. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each section of the test and kind of go over what's in each section of the test. And just for example, I guess, anatomy and physiology, understand the basic functions and interactions of the physiological systems of respiratory, nervous system, and circulatory system. Identify the basic function of major organs, the heart, lungs, kidneys, brain, skin, and blood. So those are some major parts of the body. And they're not, as you can see on here, they're not really super in detail. The basic functions and the basic functions of and interactions of physiological systems, and then basic functions of organs. So not super in depth. The CBET, I think, is maybe a little bit more in depth. Medical devices related to patient care. I'm going to pass it over to Brian and let him talk about that part.
So Dave and I did a presentation last month at MD Expo in Tampa, and we did a all-day like study group on this. And as we were coming up with the program, this one we kind of struggled with. First of all, since it's an entry-level certification, we didn't really know exactly what level we should present it at. You know, with the CBET, obviously these people are experienced and have been doing it, and so the questions are very detailed and thorough, where this being entry level, you're asking people that either have very little or maybe even no experience with medical devices. So what Dave and I pretty much came up with the idea is that we were just going to do kind of a basic description and function, because really it's kind of hard to ask someone that's either got very little experience or no experience on what these things do. And again, this is all pulled from the AAMI study, or the guidebook on the certification. So some of the basic stuff includes an otoscope, ophthalmoscope, thermometer, scales, centrifuges, bladder scanners, EKG cart, and a microscope. And so what I would focus on is exactly what each one does. I mean, obviously a thermometer takes your temperature, centrifuge spins body fluids, particularly blood, like a bladder scanner, scans the volume of the bladder. Microscopes, there's really not a lot you can do with those. I guess clean them and just verify that they're, intact. Um, like an otoscope, of course, checks your ear. So just kind of a basic function and understanding of what each of those devices do. Um, and, kind of have an understanding of some of the basic functions of them, but I don't know if I'd really get super detailed on it unless that's something that you particularly see a need to. Some other devices that you'll find, one of the areas that they cover is patient monitoring. Again, basic function and understanding of what each of those devices do and kind of how they work. So for example, say like with ET-CO2, which is for end-tidal CO2, well, what do they use ET-CO2 for? Well, particularly they use it in like with anesthesia and like if they're using large amounts of narcotics, the body tends to respond quicker with the CO2 levels as opposed to oxygen. So if the patient's crashing, their CO2 is going to crash faster than their oxygen. So the anesthesiologist will monitor the CO2 as kind of almost like a canary in the coal mine to make sure that the patient's perfusing okay and there's not any problems. Other areas might include like the ECG. You might want to cover like say the different leads. You have your lead 1, your lead 2, and your lead 3, as well as your actual connections. So you'll have your left arm, left leg, and right arm. Those would be some areas that you'd want to focus on, particularly with ECG. They might ask you questions like if you missing lead 2 and lead 1, what would be the common denominator? What would be your right arm lead isn't working right? Some things that I think are probably more appropriate for the certification is stuff like, well, what's a BMET1 do? And typically most places start BMET1s off working on infusion pumps. Well, what does an infusion pump do? Some terminology surrounding an infusion pump, like what does volume represent? What does rate represent? What does the term KVO represent, which is keep vein open? You might have questions regarding proximal and distal. So proximal would be above the pump, meaning like your IV bags and tubing, and distal would be anything leading away from the pump, meaning to the patient. So you can have a proximal occlusion or a distal occlusion, or in the same with air in line, you might have a proximal air in line, which probably means your bag's empty. Or if you have a distal air in line, you might have issues with the site where the IV goes into the patient. Other things, syringe pumps. That's a fairly simple thing, but what exactly do they use syringe pumps on? They use them in the nursery and the NICU to administer antibiotics and use them as feeding pumps. But in the OR, in surgery, the anesthesiologist will use them for conscious sedation. So kind of be aware of what the device is used for as well as how it works. And also, be aware that, yeah, you could use an anesthesia syringe pump sometimes for a nursery pump and vice versa. So just keep in mind that there's more than one use for that device. Another thing I'd be, what does a PCA do? Some other things. Now, Dave and I kind of looked at this, and it's in the handbook, so it's not like we just added this, but the defibrillator is kind of a little out of a stretch to me as for BMET1. So if it's something that you don't necessarily have much experience with or deal with, have one of the senior techs go over how a defibrillator works and some of the functions that they may be testing on those. Another one is your patient therapy. temperature therapy units, what they use them for and how they work. So another area that they do cover on the handbook is the different, I don't know, you would call like test tools and actual tools. Just be aware that like on, say, for example, your Allen and torque wrenches, they do have different sizes, as well as you have metric and you have standard. As Dave says, channel locks are used for fixing screws that weren't properly applied with the Allen or the torque wrenches. Needle nose pliers, diagonal cutters. Like I said, it's just stuff, just general things that you do every day. Understanding that we use a stopwatch, typically for like checking your rate on your IV pumps. You use a graduated cylinder to check your volume to make sure that it's accurate.
It's kind of funny, Brian, because in our presentation we did at Tampa Bay, we actually had a picture of a stopwatch. And now with like smartphones, nobody has a stopwatch anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It's all on your phone, huh?
Of course, Dave and I go back to a different era when we would do things. So sometimes our, views of this stuff is a little dated. Again, stuff that you use, understanding the function of a multimeter, electrical safety analyzer, what is it used for? Why do we use them? That would be important to understand that what's important, why the values have to be as they are. A patient simulator, how to properly hook one of those up and to understand the readings that you're getting from it. Tachometer, used mostly for like lab equipment, like the centrifuges. You have to tack them out at a certain interval so that you can pass your CAP inspections. And a scale, that's pretty self-explanatory. Of course, you want to make sure that it's measuring accurately. So the next one is safety in healthcare. And this is probably one of the, I don't know, you want to say underemphasized areas, especially if you're someone who hasn't worked in a hospital before. Hospitals love rules and regulations. So in one of these areas that you're going to find safety is kind of a big thing, especially when you have inspections by like CMS and Joint Commission, and even including your own like internal people that may do inspections or check and make sure that you're doing everything okay. One area that's covered in the handbook is your lockout, tag out. And I suspect that probably most people get this training at least probably annually as part of their, I don't know, you want to call it your skill assessments. So, just be aware of your lockout, tag out, safety data sheets, like something that really biomeds don't really deal with that much, but just be aware that the chemicals that are in your department or that you may use all have data sheets on them. So if there's any kind of spill or accident, you are able to properly address and take care of the problem with the data sheet and its information. The color coding for like gases and signage. So we're mostly, like our medical gases that we get out of the walls, or like our tanks, say on the back of an anesthesia cart, understand why you don't want to mix your nitrous oxide with your oxygen. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but we don't want to do that. And, identify safety hazards. So when you're out doing your like PMs and inspections, to understand, like, well, if you see a power cord with a big gash out of it, you probably want to replace that as part of your environmental care. Understanding electrical micro and macro shock. Why do we use an electrical safety analyzer? To verify that the power cord is safe and that the patient, if they were to touch the device and go to ground, so they don't either get a macro or macro shock from it. Again, with the SDS, with our chemicals, something we like really don't deal with a lot. That's mainly like in the lab that they would deal with like any kind of chemicals. And just to be aware that, some of the hazards and safety issues regarding them. Some other areas to be aware of that would be on the test include on safety would be fire extinguishers. And unless, you know, device catches on fire, you probably don't pay much attention to the fire extinguishers. Just be aware that there are different classes and different sizes. Also, the use of them is covered under, again, this is something you probably get in your annual training as far as the acronyms PASS and RACE. PASS being for fire extinguisher, and then RACE for if there's an actual fire. Other occupational hazards that you might want to be aware of include like laser safety, like if you're working around the operating rooms, MR safety with the magnetism, as well as cryogens and high voltage associated with MRs. Also be aware of radiation, particularly like in nuclear med or in your radiology departments. And then biohazards, you know, that, you know, you have different areas where they might be doing procedures and they have open containers, needles, used disposables, that to be aware of those as being potential biohazards. And then we'll go into the next one. And so some of the risks, like again, we mentioned about the radiation with imaging devices. Be aware that, you know, if you're working around X-ray or nuclear med or radiation oncology, there is a potential exposure to radiation. When you test or work around a defibrillator, there is a high voltage discharge that can be potentially dangerous to yourself or others. Lab equipment regarding the, you know, fact that they are testing actual body fluids and that they could be contaminated, and how to work around lab equipment and to protect yourself. And then also with the current situation we're in, personal protection equipment, of course, is important. So, you know, understand the different types of PPE that are available and when the appropriate time would be to use them. And I'll hand it over to Dave.
Another section of the CABT test is fundamentals of electricity and electronics. So understand Ohm's law and how it applies to electrical safety and testing. So not only Ohm's law, but how it applies to electrical safety. So that's kind of a little different subject. And understand basic concepts of electricity and symbols. So symbols and for fuses and concepts of fuses, concepts and symbols for circuit breakers, capacitors, batteries, transformers. So you can see this is kind of like an entry-level basic electronics knowledge, not getting into transistor theory or op amps or anything crazy like that that's on the CBET test, but just the basic understanding of electricity and symbols. Understand direct and alternating current principles, so AC and DC power. Understand basic electronics terminology, electrostatic discharge or ESD, wiring color codes and wiring standards. So we kind of covered in our little review that we did, we looked at 120 volt US and European or international standard colors. We also looked at 220 color or 208 color wires. Ground, voltage, current, resistance, and LED is one that they threw in there, which kind of, I don't know, it kind of trips me up a little bit that it's in the handbook, but I guess understanding how an LED works is part of the understanding of basic electronics terminology or light emitting diode. Sometimes I wonder if this test, this associate test, I haven't actually talked to anyone or know anyone that's taken this. So And if I did, they probably couldn't give me like exact information on what is asked anyway, but I think some of this is just knowing what it is more than like high level function of it. Interpret basic operation of a simple circuit. So power switch, or sorry, power supply, switch and load. So understanding the basic operation of a simple circuit, which if you're an associate level technician, and if you're coming from a biomed program in biomedical technology, I would think you probably have a pretty good knowledge of this. But if you're just a high school student coming out of just general ed, maybe not as much knowledge of this, or if you're cross training from another profession, you might or might not have knowledge of this. So that's where the CABT is more of an entry level exam than it is like a higher level exam. It's more just knowing the basics of all this. Identifying open and shorted circuits with a simple, within a simple circuit. So just a diagram, being able to identify that. Next section of the CABT is the reasoning and problem solving. So I can't imagine that an associate technician is really gonna problem solve really in depth, maybe as they get more experience, but to take this test though, I think and pass it, the problem solving questions are probably not gonna be super in depth because it's meant to be an entry level exam. So this one is a good one. Perform unit conversions and unit readings within the metric system. It seems like I'm pretty old, as we saw in the years of experience, starting in biomed in 1989, and Brian is a little bit older than me. Both of us together are very old, and we were told when we were in school, you know, that they're going to be using the metric system solely in the future, and we're still using the old imperial system of measurement. But in the medical field, we pretty much use metric system solely. So knowing what that is, how to convert back and forth between some measurements in metric to standard is one of the things that's important on this CABT test. So also how to take visual measurements, like that graduated cylinder that Brian was talking about before, or a pressure reading off of a pressure meter, or looking at waveforms off of a patient simulator, and knowing what those are, how those are interpreted, and then knowing whether or not those outputs that the person is measuring are within tolerance. So being able to know like plus or minus, 5 millimeters of mercury, and what is your reading? Is it within that plus or minus 5? So on. So that's tolerance. Read and interpret visual representations of information. So knowing how to look at graphs and tables and interpret those to know what you're looking at on the medical equipment that is being looked at for the CABT exam. And I can't imagine that would be too in depth. There's probably going to be a graph or a table on there, and it'll say, look up, maybe even Fahrenheit to Celsius conversion. It's on a table, and you look up how much in Fahrenheit, what would it equal in Celsius? That would be looking up something on a table. Use provided information and resources to determine next steps. So this is more of a problem solving part, looking at a flow chart, which I think a lot of entry level technicians should be able to do this and be able to figure out something off of a flow chart. Like I call them decision charts kind of sometimes, because it's kind of the ones that ask like a yes or no question. Is this working or not? Yes or no? And then if it's no, go down to this step. If it's yes, go to this other step, and kind of follow that through the thing. Process of elimination. So process of figuring out something based on process of elimination, kind of what Brian was talking about with the ECG leads earlier. And then looking at a service manual, reading a service manual and being able to use those resources. I know when I started in biomed, I would always ask senior technicians, hey, what about this or what about that? And I think I was a little annoying to them, but they always told me RDB. I'm like, what is RDB? Read the book. Oh, okay, I need to read the book. So what they were talking about, the book, is the service manual. And my rule when I started in biomed was that I wasn't allowed to come to them and ask them a question after I annoyed everybody in the shop, I think, that was had any experience. I couldn't come to them and ask a question unless I brought the service manual and showed them specifically in the service manual what I was asking about. And it really annoyed me at first, whenever I started working at doing that. I thought, man, this is crazy. Why can't they just tell me the answer? But it's kind of that teaching a person to fish type of thing. And they actually taught me how to fish, by looking at the manual and figuring it out myself. And then pretty soon I didn't even have to ask anyone anything because I could just know where to look it up and find the answer myself. So I thank those people back from when I started, but that's something that I think is really important for an associate tech level person. Hand it back to Brian.
Okay, so sorry about that, guys. So one area that they also cover is healthcare information technology. And I would say this is probably one of the most dynamic parts of the test that continues to change and grow in the other certifications. For the entry level CABT, most, I would say, people that are in the field or who have interest in the field to probably have some kind of IT background, just based on most people have their own little wireless networks in their house. So a lot of this stuff is going to be just kind of, I don't know, basic concepts, not like you're going to have an IT degree or be A+ certified or something like that. One area that I might keep in mind for myself and for someone like Dave, we grew up in the personal computer era, and so there might be questions that regarding PC architecture that may not be relative or apparent to someone who's, say, younger, say maybe in their like 20s, because since a lot of our technology now is all tablet based, the actual architecture of a PC may not be as readily apparent as it would be to someone like Dave or I. And so you might want to spend some time and look over some of the basic concepts of the computer. So you have, like your RAM, your hard drive, your solid state drives, CPUs, power supplies, and stuff like that. Have your cover over your local and networked printers. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is probably older technology that younger people may not actually have dealt with before, which is kind of odd because it's been something that Dave and I have been dealing with for decades. So keep that in mind. Also, the use of computer software on both the computer end as well as your smartphone as far as your apps, how that affects through like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and other applications that, a lot of people are trending more towards using their smartphone over a traditional computer or laptop.
I think it's kind of funny because medical equipment really follows behind on like information technology advances because of the approval process that we have to go through on all the medical equipment. So a lot of time it's behind what current technology is.
Oh, completely. Because I have, again, I'm mostly work on imaging equipment, but I have like PACS workstations, and the technology, and actually sometimes the computers themselves are 20 years old. And so, PC architecture is just a standard thing I deal with all the time. But then, people that don't deal with that type of setup, say like a central monitoring station or a PACS workstation, probably don't really deal with the old PC architecture like we used to. But like Dave pointed out, our stuff is sometimes rather elderly and compared to the current
Lag
technology. Yeah, so you may be forced to have to deal with some of the older technology just because that's just the way healthcare is. Some of the other things that they pointed out in the handbook include different video outputs, USB types, network cables. So, just kind of go over it. You don't really have to have an in-depth knowledge why a VGA has 15 pins on it. Just know that it does, and it's an analog signal. As far as network cables, you have your Cat5, your Cat6. Understand that the connection on those is actually called an RJ45. And like I said, a lot of this stuff is stuff that's pretty common and known amongst people. When we got in the business, this was all like new and kind of unique, and only certain people really dealt with it. But now I think just about anyone deals with some kind of networking or IT applications in regards to their job.
Those video output connectors seems like they're changing like all the time now. They came out with HDMI, and then now there's the display port, and I mean, it seems like there's always something new now.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean,
For a while, fiber was the cool thing, and
yeah,
it's just always changing.
I have to actually sometimes go to the younger techs and show them a connection and say, what's this do? Because like Dave says, this stuff is changing, and they're getting a lot of their technology. I talked to a GE ultrasound service rep, and he was telling me that GE is actually taking technology from like the PlayStations and Xboxes and consoles and adapting it to their ultrasound machines. So if you're a gamer, you might actually do quite well working on ultrasound because the machines are just basically a glorified Xbox or PlayStation or other console system that GE's remanufactured. So I guess there is a hope for having an occupation from being a professional gamer. Again, some of the terminology, I wouldn't get too in depth on stuff. Local area network would be your network within the hospital. Wide area network would be like, say, a ATM network for a bank. Bluetooth, most people have dealt with their Bluetooth either off their phone or other devices. Now, RFID was kind of interesting. I always thought it was kind of a dumb technology, like you use it on your ID badge or like to get into the parking garage and stuff, but there are quite a bit of devices now that use RFID as their source of transmission. So that's kind of a new area that's been developing within healthcare.
Do you guys have RTLS where you work at? Real-time locating system?
Yeah, we got something like that, the equipment techs.
Ours we use, I think it's called AeroScout, and we're able to find some of our equipment that we have tags on, or we're able to find a tag that used to be on a piece of equipment.
Sure, and that's pretty much where
PMs.
where I saw that used as well, but now they're actually using RFID in some of the devices to communicate as opposed to like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So it's kind of an up and coming technology. Data closet, if you're like, unless you're working with like a monitoring system or like a tele system, you really don't have to deal with it a lot, but they may ask questions, regarding routers and switches, like your servers, some other areas like your virtual private network, which, like the manufacturers use to dial into some of the high-end equipment, like a CT scanner or like an MRI. With your VLAN, you have your virtual local area network.
A lot of the time now, like central monitors, they can do VPN.
Oh, wow.
The central monitors, yeah, it's pretty helpful sometimes.
Yeah, the ghost in the machine. Your VLAN is kind of like your hospital guest network, or say like your PACS network. These can use a lot of the same hardware that like your other systems do, say like your tele system. However, you don't want your guest network to be able to access your tele information, or you don't want the people in the lab to be able to crack into your PACS network and start looking at images there. Some of the other things you might run into regarding healthcare is HIPAA. And so, most of us go through our little HIPAA training every year and, understand that we shouldn't disclose information and on and on. However, there is rather large provision in HIPAA that covers specifically electronic medical records and electronic health records. So I would spend some time going over the HIPAA specifics. They seem to really be hitting that for whatever reason. And also lately, Joint Commission has also been kind of meddling in with people's electronic health records and information that they keep electronically. Also, another thing that's always a common issue is your cyber attacks and your cyber remediation. So, understanding how a firewall works, how like a phishing email can compromise your system, software patches for cyber remediations, and the importance of having strong and secure passwords to protect your equipment with. And I'll pass it on to Dave.
So we see CABT, Certified Associate in Biomedical Technology. We see it as a stepping stone. Brian and I both agree on this. This is our opinions. We think it's perfect for new HTM professionals, healthcare technology management professionals. We think it's helpful to career changers when looking for a job in HTM. So it's a good way to break into HTM, kind of like proving, hey, I have this knowledge that's needed to do this entry-level job, and I have this certification. We feel like it should be a minimum requirement for all HTM professionals. I know there's probably a lot of people out there that are probably going, oh man, like those guys don't know what they're talking about. But at the end of the day, when you want to be distinguished separately from someone else that does like an IT job or just any basic person like we have the people called clinical equipment technicians. I think where Brian works at, they kind of have the same thing. They're just people basically that collect equipment and clean it and deliver it to different departments. What distinguishes you as being a biomedical technician from anyone else? So to me, this entry-level certification is what does it. And if you're looking at getting higher pay in the future and elevating our profession to being a higher level of profession than like it should be, because we have a lot of knowledge that a lot of people don't have to work in our field. And a lot of people think, oh, biomed, anybody can do that, or like it's not that hard. I can just cross-train into it, or on-the-job training, or whatever. And when you look at this test and you start studying for it, and people say, oh, well, maybe it's not just easy as I thought it was going to be. So if everyone entering the job in the profession has this certification as a minimum requirement, it's going to elevate the whole field. That's our opinion. Students graduating from BMET programs should have this when job hunting. I think since you qualify to take it as a student, all you need is a GED or high school diploma to take this CABT test. You should have it when you either before or when you graduate from the biomed program, whatever school you're going to. We see it as a stepping stone to CBET, which I think is what it was maybe designed to be by ACI. My opinion, I think it'll elevate the workplace, just like I was talking about a minute ago. I think CABT is great for everyone, and everyone should have this as a minimum qualification in HTM, just like the last slide I was talking about. This test can be used as a pre-employment screening tool, and that's one of the ways that ACI is marketing it. Since you can sign up for it and take it, 2 to 3 days, very quickly after you fill out the application. Say you had 5 job candidates, and you say, well, none of you have CABT. We're going to have all 5 of you take this CABT test, and maybe only one of them passes that CABT test. then you automatically know who the best candidate for that job is based on their CABT score or passing the CABT. And sometimes, you know, like maybe it's that customer service part or their attitude or whatever that maybe scores them a little higher than an interview too. But it's a good way to maybe screen out people. And there's going to be study resources, I think, in the future for this CABT for people that are looking to do an entry-level job. So my question to you, I've worked with over the 31 years now, and Brian's done 33 years in biomed. How many people have I worked with? And I was thinking about it the other day, you know, leading up to this presentation. And I thought, man, I've worked with a lot of people, and a lot of them, being in Colorado where I live, there's no school there. Like I said earlier in the presentation, a lot of them come in as like on the job training or not really, we're trying to break this person in and we're trying to, you know, well, it would be nice for me as a tech to think, well, all these people that are coming in, they have their CABT, so they have this basic knowledge already. Wouldn't it be nice to hire a person that you know has this to start with? That's my question to you if you're looking at, if you're a manager looking at this CABT certification. It makes entry-level techs more capable, I thought.
So Dave wanted to make sure we were on the same page, just in case one of us went rogue on the thought process.
I did this slide presentation. I put this together.
I have
I thought it was being funny too.
I have a little different view from Dave. It's along the same lines, but for myself, I think certification's probably an individual. I don't even want to call it goal. I think people who follow and want to be certified are your people who are going to probably be your, I don't know, your overachievers, or the people that are going to kind of lead, as opposed to just saying, it's just another job, what do I care? Not to say that people that aren't certified can't be great techs too. That is not an indictment, but
view it as a job or as a career instead of a job.
Yeah, they put a little more into it. But again, like I said, certification I think is up to the individual, in my own opinion. However, I do believe, and I think AAMI might be gearing up for this at some point in the future. I believe that there's going to be some kind of either certification or licensing requirement of biomeds. You know, think about it, you got people in the hospital that take care of patients. I mean, even like dietitians.
One of the other presentations here at the Mixer, I believe, is right to repair. So with the FDA looking at right to repair and who's qualified to work on medical equipment, boom, here we go. CABT like fits right into there with that FDA requirement of right to repair and who's a qualified person to work on that equipment.
Exactly, because you know, in Colorado, there's I think like 3 or 4 states that require people that work on radiology equipment. Like Dave and I both have to have licenses through the state. So I mean, it's already begun. Obviously, you don't want somebody that doesn't know anything about how an X-ray machine works, exposing radiation without prior training or knowledge. And I suspect that down the road for like biomeds, I mean, you know, we do work on equipment like anesthesia machines, ventilators, and other life support equipment that could potentially hurt or kill someone. I think that down the road that somebody, whether it's the state, the FDA, CMS, Joint Commission, or the industry is going to say, you know what, we want to have people that have credentials and that have, you know, gone through the process that we can rely on to do this. I don't necessarily think that that's the right course to go, but I do believe, I don't know, I have no time frame. You know, the government sometimes moves really fast and most of the time they move really slow. So at some point in the future, we may be forced as an industry to go through this, and this would be the first step of that process.
And I always say it's better to have it before you need it.
Exactly.
So now that you know that you've heard of CABT, what do you think? So that's a question to consider yourselves. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you for joining us. enjoy the Nashville mixer.